They say when danger comes, you either run, fight, or freeze, but I did none of those. I sat perfectly still on my porch chair, teacup warm in my hand, waiting. The creak of metal told me my fence had been climbed, and shadows stretched long across the yard. A group of men in cheap police uniforms dropped into my garden like they owned the place. Fake badges, fake confidence, real intentions. Most people would have panicked, but not me. I'd been expecting them, and I knew exactly what they were about to touch. That wasn't just an ordinary latch on my gate. It was bait, wired 3 days earlier with a perfectly legal, low-voltage deterrent. The first man, tall and smug, reached out without hesitation. The moment his fingers closed around the handle, the trap sang to life. A crackle ripped the air like lightning splitting. A storm. Blue light burst across the yard, glowing against the night and painting his face with fear. His scream wasn't just pain, it was panic, the sound of someone realizing they'd underestimated the wrong homeowner. The others froze, caught between bravado and terror. Did the HOA really think uniforms and intimidation would be enough to control me? To make me surrender my home? They were wrong. That scream wasn't just a mistake. It was the opening signal for the ambush I had been preparing. All along. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Because this story, it isn't just about me. It's about every homeowner who's been pushed, bullied, or tricked into silence. My name is Miles Cooper, 32 years old, freelance IT engineer. According to the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association, I'm their greatest enemy, a so-called social menace. And all because I dared to plant cherry tomatoes in my backyard instead of petunias. Imagine that. A vegetable patch worth less than $50 has made me public enemy number 1. In this neighborhood, the house I paid $600,000 for, the only piece of stability I had left after my divorce, is treated like it belongs more to the HOA than it does to me. And that's why I fight. The war started the day I crossed paths with Veronica Lane, 45 years old, chairwoman of the Sunset Ridge HOA and a tyrant disguised in business casual. Veronica isn't just bossy, she's strategic. In only 8 months, she sent me exactly 47 violation notices. Not 46, not 48, 47. I counted twice. My crimes. A fence 2 centimeters taller than regulation, a house painted the wrong shade of beige, and the unforgivable sin, growing vegetables where the bylaws demanded decorative flowers. I've watched her creep through my yard with a ruler in hand, snapping photos with macro lens precision, like she's solving a murder case instead of measuring a fence. Once I half expected her to run DNA tests on my grass to make sure it matched HOA genetic standards. At first I thought it was personal, but months of digging uncovered the truth. Veronica's not just a suburban dictator, she's running a business. She has a quiet contract with Pinnacle Holdings Construction Company. Every time she drives a homeowner out, property values climb, 15% on average. And Veronica pockets a 3% commission from every cleaned-out house. Do the math. When the average home is worth $700,000, that's tens of thousands per eviction. Suddenly, the harassment made perfect sense. The escalation was inevitable. My first counterattack wasn't physical, it was legal. I baited her with paperwork, sent a certified letter requesting HOA confirmation of their inspection schedule, forcing her to put her threats in writing. Lawyers call it building a paper trail. I call it phase 1. Veronica fell for it beautifully, responding with a stiff, formal letter claiming inspections were conducted as needed. That was all I needed, her official word locked in ink. Then came the silver Honda Civic, parked across from my house day after day, morning at 7:15, evening at 5:30. My dash cam caught it every time. Same spot, same driver, someone was watching me. HOAs don't usually pay for professional surveillance unless they're preparing for something bigger. That was the moment I knew Veronica wasn't stopping at violation notices. She was planning an eviction by force. The call came next. Late. Night. Blocked number. A man's voice trying to sound like authority, but breaking under the pressure. Prepare to go to jail for defying the HOA, Cooper. Click. No name, no credentials, nothing official, just a scare tactic. What the caller didn't know was that I record every call to my landline. Evidence. Time-stamped, encrypted, preserved forever. Every threat became proof. Every attempt at intimidation became ammo. I'll be honest with you, I was scared. Not scared of Veronica herself or her goons in cheap uniforms, but scared of losing my home. This house isn't just brick and wood. It's everything I fought to keep after my divorce. I poured my savings into it, signed a 30-year mortgage, still owe the bank $200,000. The thought of it being stolen by corruption kept me awake at night. But fear can be a weapon if you know how to aim it. Fear made me precise. Fear made me cautious. Fear made me plan. The next morning, I smiled at my sister on the phone, telling her everything was fine. Lied straight through my teeth because she didn't need more worry in her life. But her voice reminded me of something. Our mother always said, never let anyone bully you. Stand up for yourself, but be smart about it. And that was the key. Smart. So I got smart. I built my defense like a battlefield. First step, legal cover. I called the police non-emergency line, reported possible impersonators trying to break into my property. They logged it as case number 2024 SC8847. Now, when the real break-in happened, the response would be instant. Next, I built a honeypot, a fake Wi-Fi network labeled Sunset Ridge Security. Anyone dumb enough to connect would hand me their MAC address, IP, and traffic logs on a silver platter. Within hours, I had 3 new devices pinging my trap. That was my proof someone was planning an electronic attack. Then came the physical prep. Hidden 360-degree infrared cameras. Vibration sensors wired to the fence. Alerts sent not just to me, but to my sharp-eyed neighbor, Mrs. Walker. 73 years old, but sharp as a tack. She agreed to be my witness. From her second floor balcony. She'd see everything and call the cops with the case number. A grandmother as a witness? That's courtroom gold. Finally, the electric deterrent. I wasn't stupid. I researched laws for weeks. Booby traps are illegal, but a low-voltage deterrent, clearly marked with warning signs, is perfectly legal. So I wired a 12-volt shock system to my gate, added UV reactive dye that would stain intruders invisible under normal light, glowing bright under UV. I installed loud alarms, professional no trespassing signs, and speakers preloaded with recordings of my voice. Calm, steady, unnerving. Hello, gentlemen. I can see your cheap shoes and non-regulation uniforms. Please continue. So when those fake cops finally climbed my fence tonight, I didn't run. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I sat still, sipped my tea, and waited for the moment their fingers touched the handle. And when they did, the crackle, the light, the scream. It wasn't just defense. It was the first note in the symphony of their defeat. That scream was just the opening signal for the ambush I was about to unleash. Select messages based on motion detection, creating the illusion that I was actively monitoring and responding in real time. My personal favorite was, did you know impersonating police officers carries a federal sentence of up to 3 years? The humor helped manage my stress, but the underlying purpose was deadly serious. Every joke was designed to unnerve and confuse people who expected easy intimidation. But the masterpiece was the fake radio modification. I'd acquired a decommissioned police radio from a surplus auction, then installed a GPS tracker, reverse microphone, and transmission capability. Anyone carrying it would become an unwitting broadcaster, streaming their conversations directly to my recording equipment. The device looked completely authentic from the outside, but internally it was a surveillance gold mine. The automated gate system was my personal favorite, though. The rear gate had motion sensors that would automatically lock when multiple people entered the backyard, essentially trapping intruders in their own crime scene. They'd come to intimidate me, but they'd end up locked in my yard with nowhere to run when real police arrived. That afternoon brought an interesting develop. I received an anonymous text message from an unknown number that read, "Miles, be careful. They're planning something illegal. More details soon. LB." Someone inside the HOA was apparently working against Veronica, which could be incredibly valuable. Having an inside source would change everything, but I needed to verify their legitimacy before trusting any information. The timing felt too convenient, but the information seemed genuine. Corporate whistleblowers usually emerge when illegal activity escalates beyond their comfort zone. If LB was legitimate, Veronica's operation was probably worse than I'd imagined. My laptop research revealed disturbing financial connections. Pinnacle Holdings shed contracts in 3 states, specializing in what they called community redevelopment projects. Their business model involved acquiring undervalued properties in established neighborhoods, demolishing existing homes, and building luxury developments. HOA harassment was apparently a systematic business strategy, not random suburban drama. Veronica wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor anymore. She was part of an organized criminal enterprise that had perfected the art of legal theft through bureaucratic intimidation. The violation notices, the surveillance, the threats, everything was following a proven playbook designed to force homeowners into financial surrender. ASI prepared for bed. My landline rang again. Same unknown number as before. Same threatening tone. But this time, I was ready with questions. "Cooper, you're going to regret fighting the system." I responded immediately. "Which system exactly? The legal system that protects property owners or the illegal system that uses intimidation and fraud?" The caller hung up without another word, which told me everything about their psychological profile. Bullies who fold under pressure aren't used to victims who fight back intelligently. I couldn't call my sister tonight because the lies were getting harder to maintain, and she had enough worries without adding mine to her list. Instead, I sat in my living room looking at the security monitors displaying my property in infrared detail, knowing that tomorrow would bring escalation. The final phase of preparation required perfect timing. I programmed a decoy timeline using smart home technology, scheduling lights, and television in the living room to create the illusion of normal evening activity while playing soft music in the bedroom. Anyone watching the house would assume he was following my routine, going to bed around 10:30 like most nights. The real genius was directing potential intruders toward the backyard kill zone where all my traps waited in perfect coordination. They'd think they were approaching a sleeping target, but they'd actually be walking into the most comprehensive surveillance and evidence collection system I'd ever designed. At exactly 2:27 a.m., the fence vibration alarm triggered. I was already awake, sitting in my darkened second-floor office with multiple monitors displaying infrared camera feeds from every angle of my property. 4 figures dressed in police uniforms were climbing over my rear fence, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested military or law enforcement training. The irony wasn't lost on me that real cops would never need to climb fences to serve legitimate warrants. These guys were professionals, but they were also criminals. And criminals always make mistakes when they think they're smarter than their targets. The honeypot Wi-Fi network immediately lit up with activity. 2 devices, connected automatically, identified in my logs as Officer, Radio 01, and backup phone. My network was now logging every piece of data from their devices, including GPS coordinates, contact lists, and recent call history. One device had been used to call the same number 17 times in the past week, probably their handler or coordinator. The other had photos of my house taken from multiple angles, confirming this wasn't a random break-in, but a carefully planned operation. My automated speaker system activated as soon as the motion sensors detected multiple targets in the backyard. The first message played from speakers hidden in 3 different locations, creating a disorienting audio environment that made it impossible to determine my actual position. "Hello, gentlemen. I can see your cheap shoes and non-regulation uniforms. That dispatcher already has case number 2024S8847 open for this exact scenario." The psychological impact was immediate and visible through my infrared cameras. All 4 intruders froze, looking around frantically, trying to locate the source of my voice while realizing their disguises had already been identified as fake. The leader of the group, a tall man with military bearing, began speaking into his radio. "Control, the target knows we're here. Radio frequency might be compromised." What he didn't know was that his radio was my modified surveillance device, broadcasting every word directly to my recording equipment. His voice was clear and confident, the kind of authority that comes from years of legitimate law enforcement experience. This wasn't some amateur criminal operation. These were professionals who'd probably been cops at some point, which made their current criminal behavior even more disturbing. "Lieutenant, this guy knows too much about police procedures," said a shorter figure near the gate. "How does a civilian have a case number ready?" The answer was simple preparation and legal strategy, but their confusion was working in my favor. Criminals expect victims to be unprepared and panicked. They don't expect comprehensive defensive systems or legal documentation. One of them tried the rear gate handle, triggering the automatic locking mechanism that sealed all 4 intruders inside my backyard. The mechanical sound of locks engaging created another moment of visible panic among the group. My second pre-recorded message played from different speakers, designed to increase their psychological pressure. "I'm currently uploading live stream footage to multiple platforms. Your faces, voices, and fake badge numbers are already being analyzed by my network contacts and law enforcement." This was partially true. My security system was recording everything, and I did have contacts who would receive copies if something happened to me. The leader responded by identifying himself as Sheriff Dalton and demanding that I come outside for questioning about neighborhood disturbances. I'd researched local law enforcement thoroughly. The real sheriff was named Thompson, not Dalton. This confirmed they were using completely fabricated identities, which elevated their crimes from simple trespassing to impersonating federal officers. The fake sheriff continued his performance, but his voice betrayed increasing frustration. "Mr. Cooper, we have reports of suspicious activity and need to verify your identity." My response came through the speakers with calculated calm. "Sheriff Thompson is the actual county sheriff, and he's already been notified about people impersonating officers in this neighborhood." The moment of truth arrived when one of the intruders approached my electrical deterrent system. I'd positioned it near the main breaker box, knowing that criminals typically try to cut power before entering buildings. The man reached for what he thought was a standard electrical panel, but my 12-volt trap activated instantly. The sound of electrical discharge mixed with his surprised yell created a perfect audio signature for legal evidence. Ultraviolet dye erupted across his uniform and hands, marking him with forensic evidence that would be invisible under normal lighting but unmistakable under UV investigation. The neighborhood alarm system triggered simultaneously, sending automated alerts to Mrs. Walker's house and activating emergency lighting throughout the area. Within 30 seconds, I could see lights coming on in houses throughout the subdivision. Mrs. Walker appeared at her upstairs window with a phone, clearly calling police dispatch with the pre-established case number. Having multiple civilian witnesses would make any defense attorney's job nearly impossible. "Target has some kind of electrical trap," shouted the man who'd been shocked, examining his UV-stained uniform without realizing the invisible marking system. "This is way beyond standard home security." The fake sheriff's radio crackled with an incoming transmission that my surveillance system captured perfectly. "Team leader, if the old man won't come out, make him scared by any means necessary." The transmission came from outside my property, confirming this was a coordinated operation with multiple participants and a command structure. Real police sirens became audible in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. The four intruders realized their situation was deteriorating rapidly, but the automatic gate locks kept them trapped in my backyard like animals in a cage. They'd come to intimidate me into submission, but instead, they'd walked into a comprehensive evidence collection operation that would provide prosecutors with everything needed for multiple felony convictions. I remained seated in my darkened office, sipping chamomile tea and watching the infrared feeds with the detached curiosity of someone observing a nature documentary. These men had probably terrorized dozens of other homeowners into compliance, but tonight their luck had run out. Sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest advantage, especially when that person has spent months preparing for exactly this moment. My phone buzzed with an incoming text message from LB Miles. "I'm Laura Bennett, HOA Secretary. There's something about Veronica and your friend Ethan Carter that you need to know immediately. The electric trap's activation created a cascading series of events that transformed my backyard into a crime scene. With multiple forms of evidence collection running simultaneously, the man who'd been shocked was examining his hands and uniform, completely unaware that the UV reactive dye now coating his clothing and skin would remain visible under forensic lighting for months. The 12VT shock had been perfectly calibrated to cause surprise and discomfort without any lasting physical harm, keeping me well within legal boundaries for property defense systems. More importantly, the automated alarm system was now broadcasting a piercing siren throughout the entire neighborhood, ensuring that every household within a 4-mile would be awake and aware of the disturbance. The fake radio system was proving to be my most valuable surveillance tool. Every word spoken by the intruders was being transmitted directly to my recording equipment with crystal clarity, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that would satisfy any court's requirements for admissibility. The leader, still claiming to be Sheriff Dalton, was trying to maintain control of his team while clearly frustrated by the unexpected resistance. This civilian has some kind of professional security setup. We need to abort and regroup. But his radio crackled with a response from their handler. Negative. If the old man won't come out voluntarily, make him scared enough to comply with HOA demands. That transmission was the smoking gun that proved this wasn't random criminal activity, but a coordinated conspiracy involving the HOA leadership. The phrase HOA demands directly connected Veronica Lane to criminal activity, transforming what might have been simple breaking and entering into a federal conspiracy case. My recording equipment was capturing not just the voices, but also background noise, radio static patterns, and even the ambient sounds that would help investigators determine the location of their command center. Mrs. Walker appeared at her bedroom window with her phone pressed to her ear, clearly speaking with police dispatch. At 73 years old, she made an ideal witness because elderly testimony carries significant weight with juries, and her elevated position gave her a perfect view of all four intruders trapped in my backyard. The automatic lighting system had illuminated the entire area with floodlights, making it impossible for any defense attorney to claim the identification was questionable due to poor visibility or distance. The intruders were beginning to realize the severity of their situation as real police sirens grew louder and closer. One of them tried to climb back over the rear fence, but discovered that my automated security system had engaged additional deterrents. Motion sensors triggered high-intensity strobe lights and air horns whenever anyone approached the perimeter, creating a psychological barrier that was perfectly legal, but highly effective at discouraging escape attempts. They were trapped in an area roughly 30 FTX 40 FT, surrounded by evidence collection systems that were documenting their every move and word. My laptop displayed incoming data from the Honeypot Wi-Fi network, revealing more information about the criminal organization than I'd hoped to collect. The device, labeled backup phone, contained 17 photos of my house taken from multiple angles over the past 2 weeks, confirming systematic surveillance and premeditation. More disturbing was a text message thread discussing cleanup procedures and evidence disposal protocols that suggested this group had experience with intimidation campaigns that occasionally went wrong. The breakthrough came when my parking lot surveillance cameras, which I'd connected to my old hacker network friends, identified their black SUV. The license plate had been reported stolen 3 days earlier from a shopping mall 40 mi away, but the VIN was visible through the windshield and automatically cross-referenced against law enforcement databases. Within minutes, I had confirmation that the vehicle belonged to a private security company that had lost its license for irregular client services 2 years ago. These weren't random criminals. They were ex-law enforcement officers working for a disgraced security firm. Police sirens were now close enough to identify as coming from multiple vehicles, suggesting that dispatch had taken my pre-established case number seriously and was responding with appropriate force. The 4 intruders could hear the approaching cavalry as clearly as I could, and their radio communications revealed increasing desperation. "Control, we have multiple police units inbound and no exit strategy. The target has professional-grade countermeasures." The response was immediate and incriminating. "Destroy any evidence linking back to HOA leadership. Use whatever force necessary to prevent testimony." That transmission would end Veronica Lane's freedom permanently. Conspiracy to commit witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit assault were federal charges that carried mandatory minimum sentences. The recording quality was broadcasted, time-stamped, and backed up to multiple secure servers in real time. Even if they somehow destroyed my local equipment, the evidence would survive informats that satisfied federal court requirements. The first police car arrived with lights and sirens at exactly 2:53 a.m., followed immediately by 2 more units from different directions. The response time was impressive, confirming that pre-establishing case number 2024 SC8847 had eliminated the usual delays associated with explaining complex situations to dispatch. The officers could see 4 suspects trapped in my backyard, all wearing police uniforms but clearly not part of any legitimate law enforcement operation. From my second-floor office window, I watched real police officers approach my automatic gate with tactical awareness and proper radio communication protocols. The contrast between their professional behavior and the panicked criminals trapped in my yard was stark and legally significant. Real law enforcement doesn't need to climb fences, use stolen vehicles, or coordinate through unsecured radio channels. The evidence collection was writing itself. My phone rang with an incoming call from the lead responding officer. "Mr. Cooper, this is Sergeant Williams with the county police. Are you safe inside your residence?" I confirmed my safety and explained that all suspects were contained in my backyard by automated security systems. "We can see them through your fence." "Do you have audio or video recordings of the incident?" I confirmed comprehensive documentation and offered to provide copies immediately. "Sir, please remain inside while we process the scene. This looks like a significant criminal operation." The man who'd been shocked by my electrical deterrent was now under police floodlights, and the UV dye on his uniform was beginning to show faint traces under the high-intensity illumination. Forensic investigators would be able to enhance that, marking significantly, creating physical evidence that would tie him to my property, even if he somehow avoided fingerprint or DNA collection. The beauty of UV reactive marking systems is that suspects never know they've been tagged until it's too late to remove the evidence. Within 15 minutes, I had 8 police officers on scene, crime scene photographers documenting everything, and a detective requesting copies of my surveillance recordings. I signed formal evidence transfer documents with Shaw 256 hash verification to maintain a legal chain of custody, ensuring that nothing could be challenged in court on procedural grounds. The professionalism was impressive, confirming that my pre-planning had resulted in textbook evidence collection and suspect apprehension. As I prepared USB drives containing the evening surveillance footage, my phone buzzed with another message from Laura Bennett. "Miles, Veronica didn't just target you. She destroyed my friend Ethan Carter last year. He lost his house and committed suicide 6 months ago. This is bigger than just HOA harassment." Laura Bennett arrived at my house at 8 a.m. sharp, driving a modest Honda Civic that looked nothing like the surveillance vehicle I'd been tracking for weeks. She was 28 years old, professional, but nervous, carrying a leather briefcase that she clutched like a lifeline. As the HOA secretary, she had access to internal communications that most residents never saw, and her decision to become a whistleblower had clearly taken tremendous personal courage. Her first words were direct and devastating. "Miles, what happened to you last night isn't isolated. Veronica has been running this same intimidation campaign against multiple families, and 6 months ago it killed my friend Ethan Carter." The weight of that statement hit me like a physical blow, transforming what I'd considered a personal property dispute into something far more sinister and tragic. Laura opened her briefcase and pulled out printed emails, financial documents, and handwritten notes that painted a picture of systematic corruption spanning multiple states. Ethan Carter had been my college roommate and best friend for over a decade, a quiet guy who worked as an accountant and bought his first house in Mesa Verde Heights, another HOA community that Veronica had consulted for before taking over Sunset Ridge. The violation notices started immediately. Lawn maintenance issues, paint color discrepancies, unauthorized holiday decorations. Within 8 months, Ethan was facing $17,000 in fines and legal fees that he couldn't afford on his accountant's salary. Laura's documents showed email threads between Veronica and Pinnacle Holdings discussing target properties and resistance levels. With the cold efficiency of a military operation planning civilian casualties, the financial pressure campaign against Ethan had been methodical and devastating. First came the violation notices, then escalated fines, then demands for immediate payment with threats of property seizure. When Ethan hired a lawyer to fight the charges, Veronica's operation shifted into high gear with harassment calls, surveillance, and finally the same kind of police impersonation intimidation that I just experienced. But Ethan didn't have my technical background or defensive preparations. He'd been genuinely terrified by men claiming to be federal marshals who told him his house would be seized within 72 hours unless he paid a settlement of $43,000. Laura showed me the suicide note that Ethan had written, mentioning his inability to fight the system and his fear that his family would lose everything because of his resistance. Reading Ethan's final words was like being stabbed in the chest with a frozen knife. He'd written about feeling isolated and hopeless, convinced that powerful forces were aligned against ordinary people like him. "I can't let Mom and Dad lose their retirement money trying to save my house. Maybe if I'm gone, the insurance will at least pay off the mortgage." The note was dated 6 months ago, exactly 2 weeks after his last phone call to me, where he'd mentioned some HOA troubles, but hadn't explained the severity. I'd been busy with my own divorce proceedings and hadn't pressed for details. The guilt was overwhelming, but Laura's next revelation transformed grief into cold rage. Veronica's blacklist contained 23 families across 3 states, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. Each family represented a specific property that Pinnacle Holdings wanted for their luxury redevelopment projects, and each family had experienced the same escalating pattern of harassment, intimidation, and financial pressure. The documentation showed wire transfers between HOA accounts and offshore shell companies, money laundering through multiple jurisdictions, and coordination with corrupt local officials who provided legal cover for the operation. This wasn't just HOA abuse anymore. It was organized crime with federal implications, racketeering charges, and RICO violations that could destroy everyone involved. Laura explained that she'd been feeding me information because she recognized the pattern developing. "Around my property, I knew what they were planning for you because I'd seen the same emails about Ethan, the surveillance, the fake police raids, the financial pressure campaigns. I couldn't let it happen again." Her decision to become a whistleblower had been motivated by guilt over Ethan's death and fear that Veronica's operation was expanding beyond individual property seizures into something that resembled organized crime. The evidence she'd collected over 8 months included financial records, email communications, recorded phone calls, and even photographs of meetings between Veronica and known criminals. The revelation that transformed everything was Laura's explanation. of how the FBI had become involved. She'd been feeding information to federal investigators for 3 months, triggered by suspicious interstate money transfers that caught the attention of the Financial Crimes Task Force. My case wasn't an isolated incident, but the final piece of evidence needed to prove criminal conspiracy across state lines. The 4 men arrested in my backyard weren't just random hired muscle. They were part of a larger criminal organization that included corrupt former police officers, disgraced private investigators, and fraudulent legal services companies. The fake radio I'd modified had been supplied to them by someone inside their organization, meaning my surveillance trap had worked even better than I'd planned. Laura's documentation revealed that Pinnacle Holdings was just the tip of a much larger criminal iceberg. The company had contracts worth over $50 million for community redevelopment projects that involved seizing undervalued properties through HOA manipulation, then selling them to luxury developers at massive profits. Veronica's 3% commission might seem small, but it amounted to over $1.5 million per year in criminal proceeds. The money was being laundered through real estate transactions, offshore banking, and fraudulent consulting contracts that created the appearance of legitimate business operations while funding criminal activity. The emotional impact of learning about Ethan's death was devastating, but it also provided clarity about my own situation. This wasn't about property violations or neighborhood disputes anymore. It was about justice for someone who'd been driven to suicide by criminal corruption. And it was about preventing the same tragedy from happening to other families. Laura showed me photographs of Ethan taken just weeks before his death, showing the physical toll that months of harassment had taken on his health and appearance. The vibrant, confident person I'd known in college had been replaced by someone who looked haunted and defeated. FBI involvement explained why my defensive preparations had worked so effectively. Federal investigators had been monitoring Veronica's communications, tracking financial transactions, and building a comprehensive case against her entire organization. My backyard trap had provided them with the final evidence needed to prove criminal conspiracy, witness intimidation, and racketeering charges that would ensure significant prison sentences for everyone involved. Detective Miller called from Utah to inform me that my case had triggered arrests in 2 other states, and that 47 families would be receiving restitution for HOA-related fraud and intimidation. As Laura prepared to leave, she delivered one final piece of information that completed the picture. Miles, there's something else you need to know. Mrs. Walker, your neighbor who helped you last night, she's been documenting Veronica's surveillance activities for 6 months. She has photographs of Veronica going through your garbage, measuring your property at night, and meeting with suspicious individuals near your house. She knew something criminal was happening and was just waiting for the right moment to provide evidence. The revelation that my elderly neighbor had been conducting her own investigation added another layer of community support that would strengthen any legal case against Veronica's organization. The coordinated law enforcement response that unfolded over the following 48 hours was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed in real life. Federal agents, state police, and local detectives worked together with the precision of a military operation, using the evidence I'd collected as the foundation for what would become the largest HOA corruption case in United States history. The 4 men arrested in my backyard had been formally charged with impersonating federal officers, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and racketeering, but they were just the beginning. My modified radio had continued broadcasting their conversations even after arrest, revealing a network of corruption that extended far beyond Sunset Ridge HOA into legitimate government offices, private security, companies, and financial institutions across 3 states. Detective Rodriguez, the lead federal investigator, arrived at my house with a team of forensic specialists who treated my backyard like a crime scene from a major terrorism investigation. Every piece of evidence was photographed, cataloged, and processed according to federal standards that would satisfy the most demanding court requirements. The UV reactive dye on the intruder's uniform had been enhanced through spectroscopic analysis, revealing not just the marking from my trap, but traces of similar substances from other crime scenes. This confirmed that the same group had been conducting intimidation operations against multiple targets, providing prosecutors with pattern evidence that would make defense strategies nearly impossible. The breakthrough that elevated this case, from local corruption to federal racketeering, came when FBI analysts searched the seized cell phones from the intruders. Text messages revealed direct communication with Veronica Lane, including explicit instructions for the night's operation. Cooper refuses to sell his house at below market value. Plan B requires intimidation tactics sufficient to ensure compliance. But the real smoking gun was a recorded phone call from Veronica to the team leader, captured by my surveillance system and corroborated by cell phone records. Her voice was clear and legally unmistakable. If Cooper won't cooperate voluntarily, use whatever methods are necessary to make him understand the consequences of defying HOA authority. Within hours of processing my evidence, FBI agents were executing search warrants across 3 states simultaneously. Veronica's home office yielded 2 computer hard drives containing 8 years of criminal correspondence, financial records, showing money laundering through 17 different shell companies, and a physical filing cabinet with documents proving coordination between HOA leadership and organized crime figures. The scope of the operation was staggering: systematic property seizures, fraudulent legal proceedings, witness intimidation, and money laundering that had generated over $12 million in criminal proceeds since the conspiracy began. Laura Bennett's role as an FBI informant became publicly known when she testified before a federal grand jury that returned indictments against 14 individuals across 4 states. Her 8 months of evidence collection had documented every aspect of the criminal enterprise, from initial property targeting through final property transfers to Pinnacle Holdings. The financial evidence was particularly damning, showing that Veronica had been depositing HOA fine payments into personal accounts rather than community maintenance funds, then using that money to purchase properties that the HOA had seized through fraudulent proceedings. The mathematical precision of the money laundering operation suggested involvement by professional financial criminals rather than amateur suburban corruption. The revelation that transformed my case from property defense to homicide investigation came when FBI forensic accountants traced payments from Veronica's accounts to a private investigation firm that specialized in reputation management and behavioral modification services. This company, operating under multiple business names, had been hired to conduct psychological warfare against homeowners who resisted HOA demands. Their services included surveillance, harassment, intimidation, and what their internal documents euphemistically called permanent resolution of non-compliant property owners. Ethan Carter's name appeared on their client list, along with photographs, personal information, and a final report dated 1 week before his suicide. The federal prosecutor handling the case, Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Morrison, explained that Ethan's death would be investigated as a potential homicide by psychological torture, a crime that carried life imprisonment under federal anti-terrorism statutes. The evidence suggested that Veronica's organization had deliberately driven vulnerable individuals to suicide as a method of property acquisition, making this case precedent-setting for federal prosecution of white-collar murder. The psychological profiles found in the private investigation firm's files showed detailed analysis of target personalities, identification of emotional vulnerabilities, and specific tactics designed to maximize psychological trauma. My live stream footage, which had been automatically uploaded to multiple platforms during the night's events, had generated over 500,000 views within 72 hours and attracted attention from investigative journalists across the country. The video evidence was so comprehensive and legally sound that defense attorneys were already discussing plea negotiations rather than attempting trial defense. The combination of my technical preparation, Laura's inside documentation, and federal investigative resources had created an unbreakable case that would result in significant prison sentences for everyone involved. The scope of victim restitution continued expanding as FBI investigators contacted families across multiple states who had been targeted by similar operations. The final count reached 47 families who would receive financial compensation for fraudulent HOA fines, legal fees, and property seizures dating back 8 years. The total restitution amount exceeded $18 million, funded by seized criminal assets, including Veronica's personal real estate portfolio, offshore bank accounts, and luxury vehicles purchased with money laundered through HOA corruption schemes. But the most satisfying moment of the entire investigation came when FBI agents discovered Veronica's secret weapons storage facility in a rented warehouse outside the city. The UV reactive marking from my electrical trap had been detected on clothing found in the facility, creating a direct physical link between the break-in at my house and a cache of illegal firearms, surveillance equipment, and what appeared to be planning materials for future intimidation operations. The weapons were unregistered and included several that had been reported stolen from law enforcement agencies, adding federal firearms trafficking charges to Veronica's growing list of criminal violations. Veronica Lane was arrested at her home office while attempting to destroy computer hard drives with a hammer, an act of evidence destruction that was captured by FBI surveillance cameras and added obstruction of justice charges to her federal indictment. Her first words to arresting agents were, "You have no idea who you're dealing with," followed by demands for immediate contact with lawyers who specialized in international criminal defense. The arrogance was breathtaking, but it also provided prosecutors with additional evidence of criminal sophistication and interstate organization that would support enhanced sentencing under federal organized crime statutes. The moment I'd been waiting for came when I was asked to testify before the federal grand jury that would determine final charges against all 14 defendants. Standing in that courtroom looking at Veronica Lane in handcuffs and orange jail clothing, I thought about Ethan Carter and the 46 other families who had suffered under her criminal organization. "Miss Lane," I said, "do you know the federal penalty for RICO violations combined with conspiracy to commit murder? I researched it thoroughly while you were planning your intimidation campaign." Her face showed no emotion, but her lawyers were frantically taking notes and requesting immediate plea negotiation conferences. The final irony came when Mrs. Walker testified as a prosecution witness, revealing 6 months of photographs showing Veronica conducting illegal surveillance on my property, going through my garbage in violation of privacy laws, and meeting with known criminals in vehicles parked outside my house. Her testimony was devastating because elderly witnesses carried tremendous credibility with juries, and her photographs provided visual evidence that corroborated every aspect of the federal conspiracy charges. The defense team's cross-examination lasted less than 10 minutes because there was no way to challenge Mrs. Walker's credibility or the authenticity of her evidence. As the grand jury proceedings concluded, I received a phone call that would change the trajectory of my life permanently. Detective Miller from Utah explained that law enforcement agencies from Colorado, New Mexico, and California had requested my assistance with similar HOA corruption cases that were just beginning to surface. "Mr. Cooper, your technical methods and legal preparation have created a template that other victims can use to defend themselves and collect evidence. Would you be interested in consulting on cases where people need help fighting corrupt HOA organizations?" The courtroom was packed with victims, journalists, and law enforcement officials. When Veronica Lane received her final sentence 6 months later, federal judge Patricia Hawkins delivered the verdict with the kind of cold precision that comes from reviewing 8,000 pages of evidence documenting a systematic criminal enterprise spanning multiple states. Veronica Lane was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for RICO violations, conspiracy to murder, psychological torture, money laundering, and witness intimidation. The 4 men who had broken into my backyard received sentences ranging from 3 to 7 years with enhanced penalties for impersonating federal officers and participating in organized criminal activity. The courthouse erupted in applause from victim families who had waited years for justice. Pinnacle Holdings, the construction company that had provided the financial motivation for Veronica's criminal enterprise, faced complete corporate dissolution and criminal forfeit of assets worth over $50 million. The CEO, Michael Brennan, received 8 years in federal prison for his role in the money laundering scheme, while 2 vice presidents were sentenced to 5 years each for conspiracy and racketeering. The company's luxury development projects were halted immediately, with properties being sold at public auction to satisfy victim restitution requirements. The financial impact extended beyond direct participants to include corrupt local officials, fraudulent legal services companies, and private investigators who had facilitated the intimidation campaigns. The restitution payments began arriving in victim bank accounts within 60 days of the final sentencing. 47 families across 4 states received compensation totaling $18.7 million, covering fraudulent HOA fines, legal fees, property seizures, and punitive damages for psychological trauma. The money came from seized criminal assets, including Veronica's personal real estate portfolio, offshore banking accounts, luxury vehicles, and jewelry purchased with laundered HOA funds. For many victims, the financial compensation was less important than the official recognition that they had been targeted by organized criminals rather than legitimate community governance. My personal settlement of $800,000 was immediately dedicated to establishing the Ethan Carter Defense Fund, a nonprofit organization providing free legal assistance to homeowners facing HOA harassment and intimidation. The fund's mission statement was simple: ensure that no family would face the kind of systematic psychological torture that had driven my college friend to suicide. Within 3 months, we had received over 400 requests for assistance from across the United States, revealing that HOA corruption was a nationwide problem affecting thousands of families who lacked resources to fight back against organized criminal activity. Laura Bennett's courage in becoming an FBI informant earned her recognition from federal law enforcement and a new career as a specialist consultant on organized crime within homeowners associations. Her detailed documentation of Veronica's criminal enterprise became the foundation for training materials used by FBI agents investigating similar cases. She testified before Congress about the need for federal oversight of HOA operations, particularly in cases involving interstate money laundering and witness intimidation. Her work contributed to the introduction of federal legislation requiring financial transparency and criminal background checks for HOA leadership positions. Mrs. Walker's 6 months of covert surveillance had provided some of the most compelling evidence in the entire case, demonstrating that elderly community members could be valuable allies in fighting neighborhood corruption. Her photographs of Veronica conducting illegal searches of my garbage, measuring my property during nighttime trespassing, and meeting with known criminals near my house had been crucial in establishing pattern evidence for the RICO prosecution. She became something of a local celebrity, giving interviews to investigative journalists about the importance of community vigilance against organized crime disguised as legitimate governance. The psychological impact of achieving justice for Ethan Carter was profound and transformative. 6 months after the initial break-in, I visited his gravesite with a detailed letter explaining how his death had led to the exposure of a criminal enterprise that had terrorized hundreds of families. Buddy, 47 families won't have to go through what you experienced. The money they stole from community maintenance funds is being returned to the people they terrorized. Your death wasn't meaningless. It was the catalyst that brought down an entire criminal organization. The conversation felt necessary for my own healing, but it also reinforced my commitment to preventing similar tragedies through proactive legal defense and community education. The media attention surrounding my case had generated unexpected opportunities to help other victims of HOA corruption. My YouTube channel documenting the technical and legal strategies I'd used to defend my property reached over 2 million subscribers. Within 8 months, the content focused on practical advice for homeowners facing harassment, legal research techniques, evidence collection methods, and technology solutions for property defense. The comment sections were filled with stories from people who had successfully used my methods to fight corrupt HOA leadership in their own communities. The most satisfying development was the expansion of my informal consulting work into legitimate business helping victims of organized HOA corruption. Detective Miller's initial request for assistance with Colorado cases had evolved into contracts with law enforcement agencies across 12 states, providing technical expertise and legal strategy development for complex HOA fraud investigations. The work was emotionally rewarding because it allowed me to channel my technical skills and legal research abilities toward helping people who were facing the same kind of systematic intimidation that had killed my friend. My tomato garden had become a symbol of resistance against HOA tyranny, featured in newspaper articles and television news segments about property rights and community governance. The professionally made sign reading legally compliant tomatoes 24/7 live stream had generated thousands of social media shares and inspired similar acts of defiance by homeowners across the country. The garden produced enough vegetables to supply a local food bank, turning what had started as a property rights dispute into community service that helped families struggling with food insecurity. The unexpected sequel opportunity came in the form of an email from Silver Creek HOA in Colorado, where a familiar pattern of harassment and intimidation had begun targeting 15 families scheduled to lose their homes within 60 days. The message was direct and urgent. "Mr. Cooper, we need your help. Our HOA chairman is using the same tactics that Veronica Lane used against you. 15 families are about to lose their homes to what appears to be organized criminal activity. Can you share your experience and possibly provide consulting services to help us fight back?" Standing in my living room looking at the security monitors that had captured the evidence leading to 12-year federal prison sentences for organized criminals, I realized that this wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter. The techniques I developed for legal self-defense had created a template that other victims could use to fight back against corruption disguised as legitimate authority. My experience has demonstrated that ordinary citizens with proper preparation, legal knowledge, and technical skills could successfully challenge organized criminal enterprises that had previously operated with impunity. The phone call to Colorado was brief and decisive. "This is Miles Cooper. I understand you're dealing with HOA corruption that resembles the Veronica Lane case. I have experience with federal prosecution of RICO violations in homeowners association contexts. When can we schedule a consultation?" The work was expanding beyond individual property defense into systematic exposure of criminal enterprises that had been operating nationwide for decades. Welcome to the HOA Justice Network. Season 2 was about to begin, and this time I wouldn't be fighting alone. Miles Cooper's victory proves that even the most powerless homeowner can defeat organized corruption, with the right strategy and preparation. If you're trapped in an abusive HOA situation, facing intimidation from neighbors, or feeling helpless against bureaucratic bullies who think they own your property, you're not alone. This channel understands your sleepless nights, your financial fears, and your desperate need for justice. Block Stories brings you real tactics that work, legal strategies that protect families, and hope that justice is possible. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people who refused to surrender and won against impossible odds. Thanks for tuning in to the story, where madness meets jaw-dropping twist. We appreciate to you taking this ride with us. Subscribe, share, and keep coming back, because the next story must just stop. Every outrageous think your seed so firm.